I've got Peter Diamond with me. He is the most recent winner, last year's winner indeed, of the Nobel Prize for Economics. And I'm going to ask him about some of these issues we're dealing with. For you, what is the biggest issue facing the United States at the moment?
We have an imminent problem and we have a long-run problem. The imminent problem is high unemployment, terrible for the workers and their families, scary for people who have jobs and are worried about holding them, and auguring ill for the functioning of the labor market down the road when things pick up and there are too many workers who have been out of work too long.
And the long run?
The long-run problem is the debt problem. It is not an imminent problem. It is a problem that it would be good to address sooner rather than later, but addressed in a way that has genuine commitment, not legislation that might be undone. My own favorite for that is fixing our Social Security system, our national pension system. That was last fixed in '83. It looks like that fix will hold for 50 years. And fixing it again along the same lines would knock 40-odd years beyond when we do it, about 25% off the debt to GDP ratio. Big hit, no run cost to unemployment. It's one of the two things that should be done along with significant fiscal stimulus.
Can we just return, because I want to talk about fiscal stimulus in just a minute, but can we talk about that short-term problem you're talking about, which is this sticky unemployment level above 9%. Are you surprised that unemployment has remained above that level for quite so long?
I stopped being surprised when I went back and read more carefully the Reinhart Rogoff book.
Okay, let me ask you another way into it, because when you withdrew your candidacy for the Federal Reserve just in June, you said an understanding of the labour market is absolutely critical for forming Federal Reserve policy. Now, can I just ask you to elaborate on that and what you think the Federal Reserve should be doing at this stage?
Every time the economy is doing badly, there are people who say, this time it's structural, it's not an aggregate demand problem. There was a debate like that in the 60s when I was a graduate student. And so it is true, we do get structural problems. Part of what we've got now is we overbuilt in construction. We won't go back to that level of construction for a long time. So there is the process of moving those workers to other jobs. That's a piece of the problem, but it's a small piece. The big piece of the problem is inadequate aggregate demand. And for the Fed to figure out what to do, which way to be pushing, it has to have a sense of how much of the problem is structural and how much of the problem is aggregate demand.
And so what do you...
Right now, we need a big boost of aggregate demand. My favorite for that would be a big infrastructure program. Before, there was focus on shovel-ready because this was thought about as a run-of-the-mill recession, and if you don't get your stimulus quickly, it'll be too late. I don't think we're worrying about that now, so we can go ahead. And from the point of view of the debt problem, we have an infrastructure problem whether we have an unemployment problem or not. So if we do it now rather than later, it's going to save money because we'll be drawing on idle resources, both capital and labor in part. This is doing something we have to do anyway.
How do you fund an infrastructure program, a fiscal program, when you've got a debt ceiling in place?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't have a debt ceiling in place, but secondly, you have to raise it. And that will be part of what will happen after the election. I'm hoping the American public will recognize that the debt ceiling was a Washington-created crisis, not an economic crisis. There was obviously no shortage of demand for U.S. debt. The interest rate is trivial for short-term debt, very low for long-term debt. The issue is, do we let Washington create another crisis, or do we get on with doing what the economy needs?
And this is really the risk for Washington, is that any crisis that we're in could actually be exacerbated by more policy errors.
More policy errors have the opportunity to exacerbate any problem, even a non-problem.